The $50 billion secret. The wedding that was an execution. The wedding reception was flawless. Held at the opulent Thayer family estate in the Hamptons, it was the social event of the season. Elara Vance, a quiet curator, was marrying tech billionaire Ethan Thayer. But as the champagne flowed, Elara approached the microphone, her hand steady. "I'd like to propose a toast," she began, her voice echoing across the ballroom. "A toast to my new family." But what came next wasn't a toast. It was an execution. In front of 500 elite guests, she exposed her new in-laws and the woman who betrayed her. But the biggest shock? What the billionaire Groom said next. Subscribe now and like this video to find out. New money, old scorn. The world knew Elara Vance as the quiet, brilliant museum curator who had captured the heart of Ethan Thayer, the elusive billionaire CEO of Nexus Dynamics. Their romance was a modern fairy tale, the shy art historian and the tech titan. Ethan was not old money like his parents. He had built his empire from scratch, a fact his parents, Arthur and Genevieve Thayer, never let him forget. The Thayers were Mayflower money, a lineage that dripped with contempt for anyone outside their exclusive world. From the moment Ethan introduced Elara, they treated her not as a fiancée, but as a curiosity, a temporary project Ethan would soon tire of. "She's quaint," Genevieve had remarked at their engagement party, her eyes scanning Elara's simple, elegant dress. "But Ethan, darling, the Thayer name requires a certain polish." "She's a genius, mother," Ethan had countered, his arm tightening around Elara's waist. "She has more substance than our entire social register combined." But the subtle war continued. Genevieve and Arthur saw Elara as a threat to their control over the Thayer legacy. They wanted Ethan to marry blue blood, a woman from a family they could merge with, not a commoner who worked in a museum. The wedding became their chosen battlefield. It was to be held at Greycliff, the sprawling family estate in the Hamptons. It was less a home than a monument to Gilded Age arrogance, perched on bluffs overlooking the Atlantic. Genevieve had seized the planning reins with military zeal, hiring vendors Elara had never heard of, ordering flowers Elara disliked, and compiling a guest list that included everyone but Elara's small family. "We simply don't have the room, dear," Genevieve had smiled, a thin, reptilian expression. "It's a very exclusive list. Senators, CEOs, you understand." Elara's only true ally, it seemed, was her cousin and maid of honor, Lauren. Lauren was everything Elara wasn't. Bubbly, outgoing, and effortlessly glamorous. She had been Elara's pillar, her confidant, her shield against the Thayer matriarch. "Don't let her get to you," Lauren would whisper, handing Elara a glass of champagne. "Genevieve is a fossil. You and Ethan are the future. Just smile, wear the dress, and get that ring." The ring, a dazzling Cartier square-cut diamond that felt heavier than a stone. It was a symbol not of love, but of possession. As the wedding week began, the pressure mounted. The estate buzzed with staff. Florist trucks and catering rigs clogged the long, winding drive. Elara felt like a ghost, haunting her own life, floating through rooms as decisions were made about her, never with her. "Ethan, this is insane," Elara said one night, standing on the terrace of their guest house. "This isn't a wedding, it's a corporate merger." Ethan, illuminated by the moonlight, turned to her. His face, usually so open and warm, looked weary. "I know, but it's the last battle, Elara. Once we're married, they lose. They lose their leverage, they lose their control. Just get through this, for me. Then we can go back to our life." But a persistent dread had settled in Alara's stomach. It wasn't just the snobbery. It was the way Arthur Thayer looked at her, like a chess piece he was about to sacrifice. And it was the way Lauren, her sweet, understanding cousin, kept checking her phone, her bright smiles never quite reaching her eyes. "You're nervous," Alara told herself, watching the fog roll in over the dark Atlantic. "It's just pre-wedding jitters." She was wrong. It wasn't jitters. It was her intuition, screaming that the fairy tale was a meticulously constructed lie, and she was the only one who didn't know the ending, the flaw in the perfect plan. The first crack appeared 3 days before the wedding, at the final dress fitting. Alara hadn't wanted a designer monstrosity. She had found a simple, exquisitely beaded 1930s vintage gown in a small antique shop. It was her something old. She loved it. Genevieve had insisted the fitting be held in Graycliffe's grand living room. "We must see how it looks in the light," she'd insisted. Alara stood on the small dais, the dress fitting perfectly. Not even Genevieve's sour expression could ruin the moment. "It's beautiful, Alara," Ethan said, his voice soft. Genevieve glided over, holding a glass of Chateau Petrus red wine. "Yes, it's passable, though it washes you out a bit, dear. You lack the stature for vintage." She circled Alara like a shark. "It needs something, perhaps a brooch, a very, very large brooch." And then, with a theatrical gasp, Genevieve stumbled. It was a masterful performance. The glass of wine didn't just spill, it arced, soaking the entire cream-colored bodice of the gown with a stain that looked like blood. Alara stood paralyzed. The room went silent. The dress, her one piece of self in this whole charade, was ruined. Genevieve clapped her hands to her pearls. "Oh my God, how clumsy of me. That old frail silk, it's ruined. Completely ruined." Alara looked at the dark, spreading blotch, and then at Genevieve's eyes. There was no apology in them, only triumph. Before Alara could even mourn, Lauren sprang into action. "Oh, Alara, no, don't worry, I've got this." Lauren dashed from the room and returned moments later, holding a huge white garment bag. "I just knew something like this might happen. Genevieve is so erratic, so I came prepared." She unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress that was the antithesis of Alara's. It was a huge, modern Balenciaga ball gown, stiff with taffeta, encrusted with crystals. It was loud, flashy, and screamed new money. It was, Alara realized with a jolt, a dress Genevieve would have chosen. "Try it on," Lauren urged, her smile too bright. How did you get this?" Alara asked, her voice numb. "Oh, I have connections," Lauren said breezily. "Just pulled a few strings, knowing how important this wedding is. It's a sample. Look, it will be perfect." Ethan looked troubled. "Alara, you don't have to." "Nonsense, Ethan," Genevieve interjected, her good humor miraculously restored. "Lauren has saved the day. She's proved far more capable than we thought. Alara, put it on. We're on a schedule." Later that night, Alara sat alone. The ruined vintage dress lay crumpled at her feet. Lauren's rescue felt wrong. How did she have a brand new, six-figure designer gown on standby? And why did it feel like a coordinated attack? "She's just trying to help," Alara told herself. "You're paranoid." But the paranoia was taking root. She decided to get some air. She walked silently down the estate's long, carpeted hall. As she passed Arthur's study, she heard his voice, low and angry. She froze, pressing herself against the wall. "I don't care about appearances," Arthur was growling into the phone. "The prenup is ironclad. She signs it tomorrow, or Ethan cuts her out. But the real asset is the Blackwood clause. Once she's in, she's in. We just need her signature on the merger papers after the ceremony. Yes, as a formality. She'll be so dazed she won't even read it. And if she becomes a problem, well, the other arrangement will take care of her. Ilara's blood ran cold. Blackwood clause? Merger papers? Other arrangement? She slipped away, her heart hammering. This wasn't just about a dress. This was about something much, much bigger. They weren't just trying to humiliate her, they were trying to trap her. And the other arrangement sounded terrifyingly final. The curator's investigation. Ilara was a curator. Her entire life was dedicated to research, to finding the history beneath the surface, uncovering the provenance. She knew how to excavate. Now she had a new project, the Thayer family. She started that night. She told Ethan she had a migraine and locked herself in the guest house. Her first target, Lauren. The backup dress was the loose thread. Ilara searched online for the specific Balenciaga gown. It wasn't a sample. It was from the latest couture collection, a custom order, the kind of thing that takes months, not an just-in-case purchase. Ilara's mind raced. Lauren didn't have that kind of money or those connections. But Genevieve did. Ilara needed more. She remembered Lauren borrowing her laptop a week ago to check a flight. Ilara rarely used that laptop, but she opened it now. She ran a file recovery program, looking for recently deleted items. Bingo. A hidden folder, deleted from the desktop, but not the drive. It was labeled as contingency. Her hands shook. She clicked. It wasn't emails. It was a phone mirror. Lauren's phone. It looked like Lauren had backed up her phone to Ilara's laptop and forgotten to securely delete the file. The contents made Ilara physically ill. It was a text thread, not with a secret lover, not with a friend. It was with Arthur Thayer. Arthur. She's emotional, unstable. The dress incident was a masterpiece. She is off balance. Lauren. She is buying my supportive cousin act. She trusts me completely. Arthur. Good. The $50,000 has been transferred. Remember the plan. You are not seducing him yet. That comes after the honeymoon. Lauren. I know. I build her trust. She confides in me. After the wedding, I make my move on Ethan. He's lonely. She's difficult. I'll be the comfort he needs. Arthur. This marriage cannot last more than 6 months. When it falls apart, and he's caught in an infidelity scandal with his own wife's cousin, he'll be ruined. Genevieve and I will invoke the morality clause in the company bylaws. We will seize back control of the board. Nexus Dynamics will be ours again. Lauren. And my payout? Arthur. 10 million. And him if you can keep him. But I doubt it. Just do the job. Ilara leaned back, the laptop screen swimming. Lauren. Her cousin. Her maid of honor. She wasn't an ally. She was a mercenary, hired by Arthur and Genevieve. This entire time, the Mistress plot wasn't for Ethan to cheat before the wedding. It was a long con. They were manufacturing a mistress, and it was Lauren. They were going to destroy Ethan's reputation, frame him for infidelity, and use the resulting scandal to seize his company. Ilara's humiliation? The dress? It was all just a psychological game to make her look erratic and unstable, to drive a wedge between her and Ethan before Lauren even made her move. She felt a surge of cold, clarifying rage. They thought she was a silly, fragile bird. They had no idea who they were dealing with, but then she remembered Arthur's phone call, the Blackwood clause, the merger papers. This affair plot was despicable, but it was a smokescreen. The texts didn't mention Blackwood. That was a different, deeper secret. The affair was to oust Ethan from the board. But what was the other part of the trap? The part meant for her? She had to get into Arthur's study. Ilara waited until 3 a.m. The massive estate was silent, shrouded in coastal fog. She crept from the guest house, dressed in black, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was a curator, not a spy. But the principle was the same. Handle artifacts with care and leave no fingerprints. She had seen Arthur use his keypad code for the study before. His wedding anniversary? Pathetic. The heavy oak door clicked open. The study was a tomb of old money, smelling of leather, brandy, and privilege. His computer was on, a sleek, expensive desktop rig. It was password locked. Ilara's mind raced. What would a narcissist like Arthur use? She tried Thayer. No. Greycliff? No. Mayflower? No. Then she saw the small framed photo on his desk. It wasn't of his wife or son. It was of a racehorse. A small plaque on the frame. Read, Blackwood, winner of the Belmont Stakes, 1998. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. BLACKWOOD98. The screen unlocked. Ilara dove into the files. They were mostly boring corporate documents. But then she saw it. A folder labeled Nexus Restructure. Inside was the truth. It was worse than an affair. It was financial treason. Arthur and Genevieve were systematically embezzling money from their own son's company, Nexus Dynamics. They were using a shell corporation, Blackwood Capital, to file fraudulent invoices for consulting services. Millions of dollars every month, siphoned directly from Ethan's profits into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. But it got worse. The merger documents Arthur mentioned were papers that would officially merge Blackwood Capital into Nexus, disguised as a standard acquisition. And the signature line on the new merged entity, the Director of Acquisitions? It was blank. They were going to give Ilara that title as a wedding gift. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The Blackwood clause in the prenup. She hadn't seen it, but she could guess it. It declared that if the marriage ended, each party was responsible for the debts or crimes of any corporate entity they managed. It was a perfect diabolical trap. Have Ilara sign the prenup, have her sign the merger papers at the wedding, making her the director of the fraudulent shell entity. Unleash Lauren to destroy the marriage. When the divorce hit, the fraud would be discovered. Who would be the obvious scapegoat? The new gold-digging wife who was suddenly director of the corrupt entity. Ilara Vance. They were going to frame her for their crimes. Ethan, betrayed by his wife and his cousin, would be emotionally shattered, and his parents would reluctantly step in to seize back control of his company. Ilara felt the floor tilt. She gripped the desk for support. They weren't just trying to get rid of her. They were trying to erase her. She heard a noise, a creak in the hallway. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She grabbed a small USB drive from Arthur's desk drawer. With steady hands, she began copying the entire restructure folder. Every email, every bank transfer, every damning spreadsheet. She heard the doorknob turn. She slid the USB drive into her pocket and hit the computer's lock button, spinning in the chair just as the door opened. It was Ethan. He stood in the doorway, his face etched with confusion and a deep, unsettling calm. He looked at her, then at the computer, then back at her. "Ilara, what are you doing in my father's study?" Her heart stopped. This was the moment of truth. Could she trust him? Was he a part of it? Arthur's texts implied Ethan was a victim, but she couldn't be sure. She took a deep breath and made her choice. "I think," she said, her voice trembling but clear, "you and I need to postpone the honeymoon. We have a problem." She told him everything. She laid out Lauren's plot. She explained the Balenciaga dress. And then she told him about Blackwood Capital, the embezzlement, and the trap they had set for her. She watched his face, expecting rage, disbelief, or denial. Instead, Ethan Thayer listened with an intensity that chilled her. His expression did not change. When she was finished, he was silent for a full minute. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Finally, he spoke. "You found all of this in 3 days. Ethan, are you hearing me? Your parents are criminals. They are framing me. Lauren is—" "I know," he said. Elara stared. You know? "I've known they were stealing from me for 2 years," Ethan said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I just didn't know how they were doing it. Blackwood Capital. That's the piece I was missing. And I had no idea they would pull Lauren into it. That's new." "You knew? And you let me walk into this? You let them humiliate me?" "Elara," he said, stepping into the room. "I knew they were thieves. I didn't know they were monsters. I thought they just wanted money. I didn't realize they wanted to destroy you." He looked at the USB in her hand. "They underestimated you. They think you are a museum piece. They don't realize you are a weapon." "What do we do?" she whispered. "We call the police. We call off the wedding." "No," Ethan said, a hard light coming into his eyes. "We do neither. The wedding is tomorrow. 500 of the most powerful people in the world will be here. My parents plan to destroy us. What they don't realize is, we plan to destroy them." "What do you mean?" "I mean," Ethan said, taking the USB drive from her hand, "you're going to wear your beautiful dress. You're going to walk down that aisle, and you and I are going to put on the performance of our lives." The performance of their lives. The morning of the wedding was a masterpiece of cognitive dissonance. Elara was laced into the garish, stiff Balenciaga gown by a fawning Lauren. "You look stunning," Lauren gushed, her eyes bright with duplicity. "So much better than that old rag. You look like a Thayer." "Thank you, Lauren," Elara said, her voice smooth as silk. "I couldn't have done this without you." Genevieve was in her element, marching through the halls of Greycliff, barking orders at staff. She saw Elara and gave a rare, thin smile. "See? I told you that dress was better." Finally fitting in. "You were right, Genevieve," Elara said. "Today is a day for new beginnings. Gongs." The house overflowed with hydrangeas. A string quartet played softly. Guests began to arrive. The CEO of J.P. Morgan, a senator from New York, tech rivals from Silicon Valley. It was a sea of power, and Elara, Ethan, and his parents were at the center. Ethan found her just before the ceremony. He looked impossibly handsome in his tuxedo. He took her hands. "Are you ready?" "No," she whispered truthfully. "I'm terrified." "Good," he said. "Use it. Remember, they want you to be the trembling, naive bride. They're counting on it." Then he leaned in and whispered, "I sent a small gift to your room, a something new. I think you should wear it." He left. Elara, confused, rushed back to her bridal suite. On the bed, perfectly spread out, was her original vintage 1930s dress. It was pristine. The wine stain was gone. A small note was pinned to it. "My friend at the Met Museum is a genius with textiles. I could never let you marry in a dress chosen by our enemies." Elara stripped off the Balenciaga and pulled on her dress. When she stepped out at the top of the grand staircase, she saw Genevieve's face. The matriarch's smile froze, and her eyes widened in pure fury. Elara simply smiled and began her descent. The ceremony itself was a blur. It took place on the lawn, the Atlantic crashing violently against the bluffs below. Elara and Ethan stood under an arch of white roses. She could feel Arthur's gaze on her. She could feel Lauren standing beside her, radiating smug victory. They said their vows. Elara's voice was steady. "I promise to be your partner," she said, looking straight into Ethan's eyes, "in truth and transparency, with no secrets between us. Your world is mine, and my world is yours, always." Ethan's vows were equally loaded. I promise to honor you, to protect you, and to build a life with you, based on unconditional trust. I will be your shield, and I will be your sword. No one will ever hurt you again. I swear it." They were pronounced husband and wife. Ethan kissed her, a brief, hard kiss that felt less like romance and more like a pact. The crowd erupted. The trap was set. The reception was held in the grand ballroom, a cavernous space with gold leaf ceilings and crystal chandeliers that once belonged to a Russian czar. The atmosphere was ebullient. Champagne flowed like water. Ilara and Ethan had their first dance. "They're watching us," Ilara whispered, as Ethan twirled her. "Of course," he murmured back. "My mother is livid about the dress. My father is already calculating how long it will take to get you to sign those papers. And Lauren is probably picking out the china pattern for her wedding to me." "This is insane," she said. "This is justice," he replied. "It's time for the toasts." They took their seats at the head table. Arthur, as father of the groom, stood up first. He tapped his glass. "Friends, family," he began, his voice booming. "We are here to celebrate a joining. When my son Ethan first built his company, he did it with ideas. But ideas are fleeting. It is legacy that endures. It is family that endures." He raised his glass to Ilara. "We are so surprised Ethan chose someone so simple, but we're certain she'll learn the Thayer way. She is a quick study after all. We welcome you, Ilara, to the family." The applause was polite. It was a clear, public insult. Next, Genevieve rose. "To Ethan and Ilara, may they be as happy as they deserve." Another veiled threat. Then, Lauren. "To my dearest cousin, Ilara," she gushed, lifting her glass. "We've been through so much. I'm so happy you finally found someone to take care of you. You deserve all the happiness in the world. And to Ethan, welcome to the family. I look forward to getting to know you much better." She winked. It was disgusting. Ilara felt the stares of 500 people. Finally, it was Ilara's turn. Ethan squeezed her hand. She stood up, walking toward the microphone. The room quieted. "Thank you," she began, her voice soft, making the crowd lean in. "Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Genevieve and Arthur, for this extravagant welcome. And thank you, Lauren, for everything." She smiled, a small, sad smile. "Arthur mentioned that I'm a quick study, and he's right. I've learned a lot since meeting the Thayers. I've learned about art, about business, about family values." She turned to Ethan's AV technician, who was manning the large screen set up for a romantic slideshow. "Jamie, could you please run the presentation I gave you? I call it the Thayer Family Values." Genevieve looked confused. Arthur narrowed his eyes. "Of course, Mrs. Thayer," the technician said. The screens flickered. But it wasn't a photo of Ilara and Ethan. It was a bank statement. A $50,000 transfer from Thayer Industries to a private account. "This first slide," Ilara said, her voice gaining strength, "is a generous gift from my new father-in-law, Arthur Thayer, to my maid of honor, Lauren. A thank you for her services." A collective gasp swept the room. Lauren went white. Click. The next slide. It was the text thread, blown up, 20 feet high. "Arthur, this marriage cannot last more than 6 months. Lauren, I know. I'll make my move on Ethan. He's lonely. I'll be the comfort he needs. Arthur, we will seize back control of the board. Nexus Dynamics will be ours. This," Ilara said, her voice ringing with ice, "is the plan. Hire my own cousin. Seduce my husband, fabricate an infidelity scandal, and steal his company. A round of applause for family values, please." Lauren let out a choked sob and slumped in her chair. "But wait," Alara said. "There's more." Click. The next slide. A complex diagram of shell corporations. Nexus Dynamics at the top. An arrow pointing to Blackwood Capital. Cayman Islands. "This," Alara said, "is the real family business. Embezzlement. For the last 2 years, Arthur and Genevieve Thayer have been siphoning millions of dollars from their own son." Arthur shot to his feet, his face purple. "This is slander, lies, security. Turn this off." "Oh, but it's not slander if it's true, Arthur," Alara said. "I found the Blackwood file in your study, the one password protected with the name of your favorite racehorse." Arthur froze. "And the best part," Alara continued, her voice shaking with righteous fury, "was the trap you set for me. The plan to make me the director of Blackwood Capital, to frame me for your fraud, to send me to prison while you stole my husband's empire." The ballroom was in chaos. Guests were standing. The senator looked horrified. The J.P. Morgan CEO was already heading for the door. Genevieve shrieked, a high animalistic sound. "Bitch! Ungrateful gutter rat! We gave you everything!" "You gave me nothing," Alara spat. "You tried to take everything. You ruined my dress. You insulted my family and tried to put me in a cage. You thought I was stupid. You thought I was weak. You thought I was just a simple girl from a museum." All eyes were on Alara. All eyes were on the fuming, exposed Thayers. And then all eyes turned to the one person who hadn't spoken. Ethan Thayer, the billionaire groom. The billionaire's trap. The world paused. For one full, agonizing second, the only sound in the opulent ballroom was the high-fidelity feedback of the microphone Alara had just dropped. It swung gently on its stand, a pendulum ticking out the end of an era. The images, the texts, the bank transfers, the Blackwood Capital logo were burned onto the massive screens. An impossible-to-ignore monument to the Thayers' betrayal. Alara's heart hammered so hard, she felt it in her teeth. Her hands were slick with cold sweat. She had done it. She had lit the match and thrown it into the powder keg. She stood at the epicenter of the blast and had no idea who, if anyone, would be left standing. Then the world shattered. It wasn't a gasp. It was a roar. A cacophony of 500 voices erupting at once. Chairs scraped, glass tumblers fell, and a sea of tuxedos and couture gowns shifted as people surged to their feet. Senator Thompson's face was a mask of political horror. Mr. Davies, the J.P. Morgan CEO, was already on his phone, his face grim, no doubt short-selling Thayer stock. But the true explosion came from the head table. "Ethan!" Genevieve's scream was inhuman. It was a primal, animalistic sound of a creature struck dead. She lunged, not for Alara, but for the nearest projection screen, her lacquered nails raking at the image of their own texts. "Lies! Slander! Turn it off! Turn it off!" Lauren simply imploded. She made a small, choking sound and slid from her chair, a boneless puppet whose strings had been cut, collapsing onto the floor in a heap of designer tulle and shame. Arthur, however, was pure volcanic rage. His face was a terrifying shade of mottled purple. "Bitch!" he roared, pushing his chair back so hard it toppled over. He wasn't aiming for the screens. He was aiming for Alara. "Ungrateful gutter rat! I'll kill you!" He was halfway to her before a wall of black-suited security men materialized, intercepting him with the brutal efficiency of a linebacker tackling a quarterback. He slammed into them, his fists flailing. "Grab her! She's a corporate spy! She planted that evidence! She's lying! She's trying to ruin us! Ruin my son!" This was the moment of truth. Alara's eyes snapped to the one person in the room who mattered, the one man whose reaction would decide her fate. Ethan Thayer, her husband. He hadn't moved. He stood perfectly still in the midst of the pandemonium, watching the mayhem erupt. He watched his mother clawing at a screen like a lunatic. He watched his father, his Mayflower lineage reduced to a punching thug, spitting obscenities as security contained him. He watched Lauren, crying hysterically, mascara and desperation streaking her face. Ilara's breath caught. He was calm. Too calm. Was this the part where he disavowed her, where he painted her as a hysterical, jilted bride? Had she miscalculated? Was he also part of a trap so deep she hadn't seen the bottom? Arthur saw his son's stillness and mistook it for shock. "Ethan!" he bellowed, straining against the security wall. Tell her she's a liar. Tell her you hate her. Tell them it's all her doing." Ethan Thayer let the silence linger. He allowed his father's accusation to float in the air, thick and poisonous. Then, slowly, he rose to his feet. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. Calmly, he picked up the heavy crystal water goblet from their table. He looked at it, then looked at his father. And he threw it, not at his father, but onto the floor by his father's feet, where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. The resulting crash cut through the remaining noise like a gunshot. A terrified, absolute silence fell over the room. Ethan picked up the microphone from the head table. The electronic pop as he turned it on was like a judge's gavel. He looked at his father, who was still gasping for breath, his $10,000 tuxedo ripped at the shoulder. Ethan's expression wasn't rage. It wasn't sadness. It was the kind of disappointment a professor shows a star student who just cheated on a simple test. "She didn't fake anything, Father," Ethan said. His voice was amplified, cold, and clear as a diamond. It echoed off the gold leaf ceilings. Not a single thing. A new wave of whispers rippled through the crowd. Arthur's face went from purple to a sickly white. Ethan addressed the 500 stunned guests. "My wife is a brilliant woman, a curator, a researcher. Her entire life is dedicated to finding the truth beneath the paint, the provenance behind the artifact. And in 3 days, she uncovered a criminal conspiracy that has been poisoning my company and my life for years." He turned to his parents. "She is completely correct. My parents are thieves. My wife's cousin is a whore for hire. Everything you see on those screens is the unvarnished, pathetic truth." Ilara felt a wave of relief so powerful her knees almost buckled. He believed her. He was standing up for her. But Ethan wasn't finished. He held up a hand. "But the truth is, Ilara only found about 70% of it." A new silence of confusion. Ilara looked at him, startled. "What?" Genevieve, who was gasping by the screen, froze. Arthur's eyes narrowed. Ethan smiled, a thin, dangerous smile that contained no warmth whatsoever. "That other 30%, the accounts in Switzerland that Blackwood Capital was feeding. The 80 million in laundered art purchases my mother has been gifting to international museums to clean the money? The bribery. Oh, that's my favorite part." He pointed the microphone, not at his parents, but at the crowd. "Isn't that right, Senator Navarro?" The senator from New York looked like he'd been shot. "That anonymous $5 million donation to your youth foundation, right after that Nexus Dynamics defense contract was suddenly approved by the committee? The one my father personally lobbied for, against my express wishes?" Senator Navarro began backing away, muttering to an aide, Get the car now." Ethan's gaze swept the room. "My parents weren't just embezzling. They were committing wire fraud, securities fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to bribe a public official. They weren't just trying to steal Nexus Dynamics. They were using it as their personal piggy bank to commit federal crimes." He finally looked at his father, who was now shaking. "You see, Father, my wife, in her brilliance, was gathering evidence for what she thought was a divorce filing, or a criminal case to save herself. I, Ethan said, tapping his own chest, have been gathering evidence for the Southern District of New York for 18 months. The gasp in the room was so sharp it stole the air. Arthur Thayer's legs gave out, and he staggered, grabbing a chair for support. He was looking at his son as if for the first time. "This wedding," Ethan announced, his voice ringing with the finality of a death sentence, "was a trap. But not for my wife. It was never for her. It was for you." Ilara's mind reeled. 18 months? He knew. He knew the whole time. "I knew they were stealing from me since the Q2023 audit," Ethan continued, his voice a quiet, terrifying monotone, as if explaining a complex algorithm. "I knew you were arrogant. I knew you, Mother, were consumed with a bitterness that was rotting you inside because your son outshone you. I knew you hated Ilara because she was smart and kind and mine. So I let them," he said. "I let them steal. I let them build their little shell corporation. I let them plan their takeover. I fed them false information. I let them believe they were winning. Because I wasn't just building a civil case. I was building a federal one. I needed you to commit so many crimes, so publicly, that no lawyer, no judge, no dynasty could detach you from it. I just needed one final, public piece of evidence to prove motive and intent beyond any doubt. I needed to show the world why you were doing it, that you were trying to frame an innocent woman. And you," he sneered, "walked right onto the stage I built for you." "Ethan, please." "Son," Arthur began, his voice a pathetic whine. "Blood. I'm your father. Blood." Ethan laughed, a cold, barking sound. "Blood is what you have on your hands. You were going to sacrifice an innocent woman to save your own skins. You were going to let Ilara rot in a federal prison for your crimes. You are not my father. You're just the man whose name I'll be legally removing from mine starting tomorrow." Genevieve finally found her voice, a low, poisonous hiss. "After everything I did for you, I made you. I gave you this life. You made me a target," Ethan cut her off. "You made me paranoid. You made me ruthless. And today, you get to see the fruits of your labor. Thank you for the education, Mother. It's the only valuable thing you've ever given me." Then, almost as an afterthought, he aimed his gaze at the sobbing puddle on the floor. "Lauren," he said. Lauren Vance looked up, her face a grotesque mask of ruined makeup and terror. Ethan, please, he forced me. Arthur, he threatened me. He threatened my family. Ethan merely shook his head in disgust. "You were a €50,000 mistake. My father overpaid. You're not even a good actress. You have no loyalty. You have no guts. Just empty. Get out of my sight." The room was silent. The execution was over. Finally, Ethan Thayer turned to his wife. He clipped off the microphone and dropped it onto the table. The war was done. He walked to her, ignoring the wreckage of his family, ignoring the 500 staring faces. He stepped past the toppled chair and the weeping figure of her cousin. He stood in front of Ilara, who was shaking, caught between terror, relief, and a seismic, profound shock. "You knew," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You knew everything." "I let you be you," he whispered back, just for her. "You didn't tell me," she said, and there was a new kind of pain in her voice. "You let me walk into this. You let them humiliate me, the dress." "I couldn't," he said, his voice softening for the first time, his eyes at last, warm and filled with an emotion she couldn't name. "Not entirely. If I had told you my plan, if I had told you I was working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, you would have become a co-conspirator. Your evidence would be tainted. This way." He gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. You are an innocent party who discovered a crime and acted to protect herself. Your hands are clean. Your testimony is pristine and untainted. That's the legal reason anyway. And the real reason, she whispered. The real reason, he said, his thumb tracing the outline of the ring he'd placed on her finger, is that I had to see. I had to know. My whole life has been a fortress, Alara. I've been surrounded by liars and thieves and sycophants, people who wanted my money or my name or my power. I've never been able to trust anyone, not my parents, not my friends. And then I met you. You didn't care about the Nexus building. You cared about the 19th century facade it was built behind. You didn't care about my stock. You cared about the pigment in a painting. I don't understand, she said, her head spinning. You tested me, she whispered. You threw me to the wolves. No, he said, his voice firm, filled with conviction. I trusted you. I trusted that the woman who can spot a forgery from a single brushstroke could spot the vipers in her own home. I trusted that the woman who can patiently restore a shattered 14th century fresco would have the strength to rebuild a broken life. I didn't test you, Alara. I bet on you. I bet my entire life, my entire company, and my entire future on you. And you just won me the world. And with that, he leaned in and kissed her. It was not the chaste ceremonial kiss on the lawn. This was a kiss of fire and iron, a kiss of partnership, a kiss that sealed a pact. It was a kiss that said, you and me, against everyone. Alara, shaking and overwhelmed, kissed him back with all the fear, the fury, and the relief she possessed. In that moment, surrounded by the ruins of their wedding, they were the only two people on Earth. When they finally broke apart, Ethan kept his arm anchored around her waist, protective and unwavering. His voice, no longer needing a microphone, was iron once more. It sliced through the silence. Security, he boomed. Two burly men, Mr. Thorne and Mr. Diaz, who looked more like counter-terrorism unit than wedding security, stepped forward. Sir, my parents and Miss Vance are trespassing, Ethan said, his voice devoid of all emotion. They have 10 seconds to vacate the ballroom, 30 seconds to vacate the property before I have them arrested. Please, escort them out. You can't do this, Arthur roared, finding one last burst of adrenaline. He was truly unhinged now. This is my home. I am Arthur Thayer. You'll hear from my lawyers. I'll destroy you, Ethan. I will. You'll have to visit him at Rikers Island, Ethan said, addressing the heir, not even looking at his father. The federal warrants are being executed now. My lawyers are at the federal courthouse filing a motion to deny bail, citing you as a flight risk. You don't have lawyers, Father. You don't have a home. You don't have money. He finally turned his head. Oh, that reminds me. I bought the mortgage on Greycliff 3 months ago, after you defaulted for years. You haven't been living here. You've been squatting. I own the house. I own the art. I own the land. He looked at his mother's horrified expression. I even own that garish dress you're wearing. That was the final blow. Arthur Thayer didn't just break. He shattered. The fight went out of him. He was an old, ruined man. Mr. Thorne and Mr. Diaz didn't wait. They were professionals. Each took one of Arthur's arms and began marching him unceremoniously towards the grand ballroom doors. No! Genevieve shrieked, grasping at a tapestry. No, you can't. This is my life. My name. Another guard pulled her kicking and screaming away from the wall. Lauren, silent, empty, and wide-eyed as if her soul had been scraped out, was lifted by a third security guard. Her legs barely supported her. She stumbled forward, unable to fully walk on her own, and the guard half-dragged, half-guided her across the room. Her designer heels scraped helplessly against the polished parquet floor. The march that followed was nothing short of a public, social execution, a slow, agonizing walk of humiliation. No one dared break the silence except for Genevieve's shattered, incoherent sob, the kind that doesn't come from grief, but from shock and the sudden freefall of losing everything at once. 500 guests, the global elite, the powerful, the feared, the untouchable, instinctively stepped aside, parting in a wave like the Red Sea, making way for the condemned. At the grand entrance, the doors were flung open. The trio was unceremoniously ushered out into the cold, fog-shrouded Hamptons night. The wind hit them hard, brutally, as if the outside world rejected them now too. Then, slam! The colossal doors closed with a dull, resonating thud that sounded final, irrevocable. A sentence delivered. Silence seeped back into the ballroom. But this silence was different, heavier, awkward, suspended in disbelief. 1,500 of the world's most influential, wealthy, and powerful individuals now stood frozen, facing a 30-year-old billionaire and the woman he had just fought for. What was the protocol now? Did one politely gather one's coat and leave? Was the gala over? Or did life impossibly go on? Ethan Thayer still had his arm, anchored around his wife's waist, protective and unwavering. He allowed himself a moment to survey the ballroom. He took in the pale, stunned faces, the half-eaten plates of delicacies no one would dare touch again, the champagne glasses abandoned mid-toast, and the string quartet huddled in the corner like startled deer awaiting the hunter's next shot. Then he smiled. A real smile. One that softened his features and lit his face with warmth, and something almost boyish, something no one there had ever seen on him before. "Well," he said, his voice rich, quiet, even gently amused, as if acknowledging the absurdity of the last 10 minutes. "That was messy." A few scattered, shaky laughs escaped, the kind people give when they aren't sure if laughter is safe. But relief starts to break through. Ethan turned his gaze to the trembling string quartet. "Gentlemen," he addressed them, his voice firm and resonant enough to re-anchor the room. "My wife and I," he put unmistakable emphasis on wife, "never got to have our first dance. If I recall correctly, we requested, 'at last.'" The lead violinist blinked, stunned, but nodded frantically. The musicians raised their instruments with visible nervousness, exchanging quick, wide-eyed glances. Ethan extended his hand to Elara. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Thayer?" Elara, still mentally reeling from everything that had happened, the chaos, the revelation, the public downfall of her enemies, looked at his outstretched hand. Then she looked into his eyes, finding warmth there, certainty, and a promise of safety she had never known before. The fear loosened. The shock receded. What was left was him. She placed her hand in his. Her voice was soft but sure. "Yes. Yes, you may." He led her to the center of the vast, now empty dance floor. The soulful opening notes of Etta James slid into the air, melting the tension clinging to the walls. Ethan pulled her close, not possessively, but reverently. And under the gold leaf chandeliers, with 500 silent witnesses, the newly crowned king and his queen began to dance. It wasn't tentative or shy. It wasn't a fairy tale waltz. It was a victory dance, deliberate, powerful, and intimate. A dance of equals, a dance of two survivors who had chosen each other and won. Slowly a sound rose, an applause, hesitant at first. It began with Mr. Davies, a CEO notorious for never showing emotion. He stood up, clapping with genuine, awestruck respect, aimed directly at Ethan. Then, one by one, others joined in. The applause grew, swelled, became thunderous. This was not polite wedding applause. It was a standing ovation for the mastery, for the transformation, for the elegant ruthlessness of a power shift perfectly executed. "What happens now?" Elara whispered against his chest, her head resting there, as if she had finally found a place she belonged. For the first time that night, she exhaled fully. She felt safe. "Now," Ethan murmured into her hair, holding her close as the music swelled around them, cradling them from the world that watched. "We begin our marriage. We go home. Not here. To our home. And we build a life. The life we both deserve." They thought she was a pawn in their game, a simple girl they could crush and discard. They didn't realize she was the player who would flip the whole board. Elara and Ethan's wedding day didn't end with a honeymoon. It ended with the complete dismantling of a corrupt dynasty. Justice and karma served cold in front of 500 guests. Conclusion and final call to action. What did you think of Elara's revenge? Was Ethan's master plan even more shocking? We have new stories like this dropping every week, packed with drama, twists, and ultimate payback. If you love this, you won't want to miss what's next. Don't forget to hit the like button. If you enjoyed the story, share this video with someone who loves a good revenge plot. And most importantly, subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss an update. Comment below with what you want to see next.